The Pokemon TCG Pitch Black expansion was just released, and it's going to be the newest set legal at the Pokemon World Championships this August. My name's Dylan, and you probably know me from the content I make on this channel related to the Pokemon TCG's history or current competitive meta. But I'm far from just a content creator. My passion for competition has been my absolute strongest one for as long as I can remember. As a kid, everything was a fight for first place, and when I didn't win, I learned how to not be a sore loser. And I think Pokemon TCG tournaments are the perfect fit for me, as I'm not only psychotically competitive and passionate about this game, but I'm willing to dedicate lots of my time and effort into performing as well as possible. However, deck building was a major weakness of mine for a very long time, basically since I started going to tournaments in 2024. I thought I knew generally what cards were good and what cards were bad, but when it came time to build my own list, they tended to lean more in the direction of the bad. For example, my 77th place Vancouver Regional Snorlax stall list had some very questionable inclusions, like Pot Helmet, a virtually useless card, and only 3 accompanying Flute in a deck that was most optimal with 4. Despite my questionable deck lists, however, my performances haven't been too shabby. But I've gotten so much better since then that even from the start of 2026 until now, the gap has lengthened drastically. Not only have my fundamentals sharpened with more reps, but my feel for the format and metagame have as well. There aren't any official tournaments going on right now as we're in an off-season break until the World Championships. However, I happen to live in Massachusetts, and for this entire season, some of my friends had been organizing something that I really cared about. The New England Invitational Championships. This event aimed to gather all of the strongest competitors from the New England region and pit them against each other in one massive tournament. This tournament just so happened to take place in the Pitch Black format, not only making a good prep for those heading to Worlds, but it was also an opportunity for me to prove myself in front of everyone. Sure, there was huge cash prizing and a custom playmat on the line, but it was really the pride that I was chasing. You probably know who Azul GG is, right? Massive content creator, one of the greatest players ever, and an official commentator. Well, he actually grew up in Massachusetts as well, and he was going to be streaming this event to his massive audience. So in order to do well at this tournament and end up on the stream, I would need to crack open the metagame and find the proper weaknesses to exploit. So without further ado, here's what I was able to come up with. In this format, Dragapult is the clear S tier archetype, and it's not even remotely close. But it can be built in a multitude of different ways, and not being prepared for all of them means that you're not going to have a great time at a tournament. There's straight Dragapult with Crushing Hammers and no Watchtowers, with usually the Dunsparce, Holt Hammers with Watchtower and no Dunsparce, Holt Nor with Watchtower and with or without Crushing Hammers, and Holt Blaziken with rare candies. In order to have a chance in this metagame, I knew I needed a deck that could beat Dragapult reliably enough, hopefully at least 50% of the time. I also wanted a deck with a pretty close matchup spread across the board, as that's where my skill could be expressed the most. I could obviously have played Dragapult myself, but I just don't like playing the deck and honestly haven't played it enough. The new threats to worry about were Hide and Sneak and Mega Excadrill, and since this would be the first Pitch Black tournament, I wanted to have a solid chance into both. Lastly, the decks that lose to Dragapult, like Festival Lead and Alakazam, have incredible matchups into the decks that beat Pult, aside from Hide and Sneak, which is just a weak deck. Since I expected only a handful of Fleet and Alakazam players, I knew I wanted a deck that could at least put up a fight against one of them while beating other decks. This is when I decided to play Raging Bolt, aka Slop Box. Slop decks rely on Mega Kangaskhan EX and Teal Mask Ogerpon EX for their main draw engine. Kangaskhan has the broken Run Errand ability, drawing 2 cards each turn if Kangaskhan is your active Pokemon. Its attack rapid fire combo is also pretty good and is a key piece of multiple matchup strategies. Teal Mask Ogerpon has the Teal Dance ability, which accelerates a grass energy from your hand to it while drawing a card. Since this attachment doesn't take up your attachment for the turn, you can use an energy switch to move energies off of Ogerpon and onto your better attackers while saving your turn attachment for them. However, Teal Mask is no slouch itself. Myriad Leaf Shower does massive damage to Pokemon with multiple energy attached, but I'm only going to be using it against grass weak Pokemon most of the time. Latias EX is another key piece as it provides all of your basic Pokemon free retreat. This allows you to use Kangaskhan as a pivot to draw cards and allows you more flexibility when switching into your attackers. However, the rest of the attackers vary quite a bit. The NAIC winning Slop deck played no Teal Masks at all and ended up leaning into Lily's Clefairy EX as its main attacker. However, it also utilized my favorite card in the standard format right now, Wellspring Mask Ogerpon EX. Sob is one of the best attacks in the game right now, for 1 colorless energy doing 20 damage and preventing the opponent's active Pokemon from retreating. With the recent rotation of key mobility cards, Retreat Lock is extremely hard to break for most decks. Sob wins so many games for you on its own, while its second attack, Torrential Pump, can be even more devastating. For 1 water and 2 colorless energy, you can shuffle back 3 energy from the Wellspring to your deck and deal 100 damage to the active as well as 122 a benched Pokemon. This ability to take multiple knockouts at once is key against lower HP decks or evolving decks while they're trying to set up. However, I really want to play Teal Mask Ogerpon right now. You see, the NAIC winning Slopless has an abysmal matchup against End's Zoroark EX, which I see as a major threat. Teal Mask being able to one-shot Zoroark for just 3 energy while having an ability that charges it up easier gives me a fighting chance against Zoroark, which I definitely think was worth some of the drawbacks that Teal Mask has. Dragapult players with Fighting Wings Moltres can often win the prize race simply because one Ogerpon hit the board. But I had so much pull experience already, and with the tournament being best of 3, I could always adapt to Moltres in games 2 and 3. However, despite having 2 Lily's Clefairy myself as an answer to Dragapult, I wanted another main attacker, and knew Raging Bolt EX was perfect for this metagame. It has a massive 240 HP and the Bellowing Thunder attack for 1 lightning and 1 fighting energy. It does 70 damage times the amount of basic energy cards you discard from your Pokemon in play. With this option, I'm able to consistently deal with high HP threats like Mega Excadrill EX, Hydrapple EX, and opposing Mega Kangaskhan. This one attack gives me a neutral delete button, and it saves deck space that would be used on tech attackers for those situations. Bolt also synergizes extremely well with Teal Mask Ogerpon, who accelerates extra energies into play for its attack. With my main attackers rounded out, I knew I needed some support. One Pheasantipity EX is a no-brainer inclusion, not only because of its broken Flip the Script ability to draw cards, but also the option to use Cruel Arrow in the early game to snipe evolving Pokemon like Dracloak. 3 Meowth EX is a staple inclusion of all slot box decks because its last ditch catch ability allows you to find any supporter card in your deck when you bench it. This unlocks the archetype, finding me cards like Crispin to search out my energy and accelerate an extra one into play, Cyrano to grab 3 EX Pokemon out of my deck, Boss's Orders to bring opposing benched Pokemon into the active spot, and Cypher Maniac's Code Breaking, who I'll get back to in just a second. My list also plays 1 Lily's Determination just so you have an option to shuffle draw if you need to. Qian Pao has the Snow Sink ability, which discards any stadium in play when you bench it. This card's purpose is twofold, not only bumping Team Rocket's Watchtower, a problematic stadium for Slop to deal with, but also my own Area 0 Underdepths, which I play at 4 copies. AZU expands bench size to 8 so long as you have a Terra Pokemon in play, and since Teal Mask and Wellspring are so valuable to my deck's functionality, I'll usually have one down. Qian Pao, by discarding my own Area 0, reduces my bench size from 8 to 5 again, and crucially allows me to discard benched Pokemon from play. This usually means removing the Frail Meowth EX from my board, but it's great against Dragapult as well since they tend to leave large amounts of damage on your Pokemon, allowing Snow Sink to heal them. Qian Pao is also my main win condition against Hide and Sneak as they can only deal 170 damage at a time with Delmise. Since they can only 2-shot most of my Pokemon, I can heal off that damage with Snow Sink and use it multiple times per game to swing the prize trade. The trainer cards in my list are mostly for consistency. 4 Energy Switch to make my board more flexible, 4 Ultra Ball to find my Pokemon, 2 Night Stretcher to recover my Pokemon and basic energies, and 1 Glass Trumpet to accelerate more energies into play from the discard pile. However, the A-Spec choice for my deck was a toss-up for a while. Unfair Stamp could mount comebacks and provide more card draw, Prime Catcher can provide mobility and extra aggression, and Hero's Cape is just neutrally useful, adding 100 HP to any of my Pokemon. I ultimately settled on Cape though, since it's the best of the 3 against Dragapult, and I really hated losing to Pult. I was able to reach about 1940 ELO on the TCG Live ranked ladder, but something just felt missing. My Dragapult matchup was a little too close for my liking, largely due to their unfair stamp play, which set me back a turn, and that 1 turn setback was all they needed to close it out. I kept losing and losing after my high peak, and that's when I knew 3 days before the tournament that something had to change. When I took a step back, I realized that I would almost always lose to Dragapult because of 1 card, Unfair Stamp. This 1 card made my normal game plan much harder to execute, as only having 3 random cards to work with doesn't guarantee anything. Combined with multiple copies of Crushing Hammer, the Pult matchup felt way too high variance for my liking, so I knew I needed to do something about it. After all, if Slotbox can't beat Dragapult, what is the point in even playing it? Did I need to change archetypes last minute? Well, no, as when searching for any possible solution to this seemingly impossible problem, I remembered something. Alakazam is another deck that aims to be aggressive and win a prize race against opponents, and it also hates Unfair Stamp. But what the Zam players included to stop Unfair Stamp has never been included in Slot before, and after giving it some thought, it suddenly felt genius. Genesect from Shrouded Fable has the Ace Nullifier ability, which disables the use of your opponent's Ace Spec card as long as Genesect has a tool card attached to it. Since I was already playing Hero's Cape in my list, I knew that finding more tools for Genesect and fitting them into the list would be a lot easier. All I had to do was cut my 1 copy of Special Red card for Genesect and one of my 3 Teal Mask Ogerpon EX for a second tool card, which I definitely needed in order order to make this play possible. Going down to 2 Ogerpon was something I had thought about for a pretty long time at this point, and after testing with it, I really wasn't missing the 3rd copy. Losing Special Red Card was a little unfortunate though, as Special Red Card, despite being a low value card for most of the game, allowed me to come back in games where I fell behind. However, looking at my list, my deck inherently aims to get ahead early and keep that lead, and Genesect is one of the best ways to keep a lead in the game. Plus, it's not like I'll play against enough Alakazam to eliminate me, right? So I needed a second tool card for Genesect, and while scrolling through all the available options, one stood out far above the rest: Lily's Pearl. This card makes the Lily's Pokemon it's attached to give up 1 less prize card when knocked out by damage from an attack, meaning that Lily's Clefairy can become a 1 prize Pokemon. However, if I don't need the Pearl in a given game, I can slap it onto my Genesect with no drawback. It's also worth noting that Genesect taking up an extra bench space doesn't matter that much when I can use Area 0 to flex my bench size and fit almost anything. However, you might be able to spot an issue with Genesect I've yet to address, being that I play just 2 tool cards and have no way to search them out. However, let me introduce you to Cypher Maniac's Code Breaking. This supporter card searches your deck for any 2 cards and puts them on top in any order. When combined with Kangaskhan's Run Errand ability, I can suddenly access those 2 cards, and since I can find anything with Cypher, my tool cards suddenly become more accessible. Now, instead of just 2 total outs to Lily's Pearl and Hero's Cape, I had my 1 Cypher Maniac, 4 Ultra Balls, and 3 Meowth EX as guaranteed outs to a tool card. Against good Dragapult players, they would always use their Unfair Stamp on the same turn they could first attack with Dragapult. However, if I could use Cypher to find my missing Genesect pieces, run Errand into them, and get Genesect up before the Stamp knockout, suddenly my options open up drastically. Now I can consistently find that Clefairy response on the first Dragapult, and I can usually have an Area 0 in hand to bump a potential Watchtower. All of this only works because they can't disrupt my hand enough to make me whiff the combo. This new inclusion of Genesect completely changes the matchup if I can set it up, while Hero's Cape and Lily's Pearl can provide game-changing value in their own rights. The fact that Genesect isn't needed to win the matchup also means that prizing it isn't that awful because I can technically win without it. After testing my list, my mind couldn't get over how strong this 60 really was. Genesect put in work against countless other decks, such as Excadrill to turn off their turn 1 Precious Trolleys, Hide and Sneak to disable potential Legacy energies, Festival Lead to deny Secret Box, and other slop decks for either Prime Catcher or Unfair Stamp. With my 60 solidified, it was time for round 1 of the tournament, and at 10 AM on Saturday, I didn't know it yet, but something truly special was coming. There are 6 rounds in the Swiss phase of the tournament, and I'll need a record of at least 4 wins and 2 losses to guarantee that I advance to the top cut. By the way, there were some special rules for this tournament since it wasn't official. Gentleman's prize check was a massive quality of life improvement, which means that if both players agree to it, after their first deck search, they can look at their face down prize cards and write them down if they want to before shuffling them back and putting them face down. To me at least, this made the games feel more dependent on board-based skills rather than prize checking. Round 1 pairings go up, and I'm against Dragapult Blaziken, which based on their list was a pretty decent matchup. Tegan H played 0 copies of Team Rocket's Watchtower, and from our games I didn't see a Moltres either. However, as I've learned and been reminded of countless times, you can never have a free win against Dragapult, so I was still all the way locked in. Game 1 starts with me going first and my Mega Kangaskhan EX in the active spot against Tegan's Monkey Dory. I use Run Errand to start things off, draw some cards, attach an energy to my Kangaskhan, and pass. This is a pretty ideal start for me, but Tegan gets a pretty decent one of his own. He gets a decent setup with Buddy Buddy Poffin and Lily's Determination to shuffle draw 8. He benches 2 Dreepy, a Torchic, and a Shaman before retreating into Badoo and using Itchy Pollen, preventing me from using any items during my next turn. I draw for turn and immediately play Crispin to search my deck for a Fighting Energy and a Lightning Energy, attaching both to Kangaskhan. I grabbed these energies specifically because I prize checked and knew that I had one of each left after this, meaning I could Crispin to Raging Bolt if I needed to respond to a Blaziken, while opening up Energy Switch as a form of accelerating to Bolt as well. I benched my Latias EX before using Rapid Fire combo to take my first prize of the tournament on Tegan's Badoo. At this point, I knew an Unfair Stamp plus Dragapult attack was unlikely with 0 energies in play. However, Tegan does get a Crispin Rare Candy Dragapult EX on turn 2, and uses Flip the Script to draw some more cards. But crucially, he doesn't find a Dracloak or a Combuskin or an Unfair Stamp. So he's forced to just use Phantom Dive for 200 into my Kangaskhan and put 60 damage on my bench Latias EX. On my turn, since there was no disruption to my hand, I'm able to set up a nearly checkmate board state thanks to Genesect. I use Cypher Maniac to find Psychic Energy and Hero's Cape, Ultra Ball for Genesect, attach Lily's Pearl to Genesect to disable Stamp. I then bench a Clefairy, attach a Psychic to Clefairy, attach Hero's Cape to Mega Kangaskhan to deny any spread damage line, Energy Switch a Grass from Kang to Clefairy, and bench a Wellspring Mask Ogerpon in addition to a Fez to play around the potential of special red card. I then use Full Moon Rondo to KO Tegan's Dragon Dragapult, going up 3-6 after a full moon rondo. My opponent, however, isn't able to properly respond. He does establish a Dracloak and a Combuskin, but is forced to just pass with Monkidori in the active and not much going on. I retreat Clefairy into Kangaskhan thanks to Skyliner and use Run Errand to draw some more cards before attaching to Kangaskhan for turn and using Rapid Fire combo to nuke his Monkidori. Up 2 prize cards to 6, and with a fully powered up Clefairy on my bench, Tegan needs a Boss's Orders KO on my Clefairy, ideally with Blaziken. He is able to respond with a Dragapult attack as well as a boss on my Clefairy, but thanks to my hand having been undisrupted the entire game, I'm able to easily find my second Clefairy and a Crispin to win the game. Game 2 was much less interesting, however, as he just bricked so bad. After knocking out one of his only 2 Dreepy, Tegan forfeits after seeing his top deck, knowing that his only Dreepy in play would be knocked out next turn. 1-0 to start the tournament. I'm feeling pretty good, but I got a chance to see that there were far more festival leads than I had expected. This could maybe be a problem later, but I didn't want to worry about it just yet. Round 2 goes up and I'm against James H, a player I've played against multiple times at locals. He was playing the new Mega Excadrill EX deck with Metang. Excadrill can one-shot all of my Pokemon for 5 energy, and since Metang accelerates a ton of energy into play, this is pretty consistent. Also, the Metagross that evolves from Metang can deal a massive 300 damage itself for just 4 energy. Game 1 starts with him opening this Cramorant card, which is used for his bench sniping attack, while I open Teal Mask Ogerpon going first. My opening hand, however, is atrocious. Just non-grass energy cards, a second Teal Mask, and a Crispin. I am forced to just attach a Lightning to my active Ogerpon and pass the turn. Luckily for me, James also starts pretty slow, whiffing the turn 1 Trolley and only establishing 3 Beldum before passing with the Cram active. Next turn, I top deck an Energy Switch, which will definitely become important later. But because of this Crispin in my hand, I only have one play that gives me a fighting chance. I use Crispin, attach a Psychic to my active Ogerpon, and put a Grass into my hand, use Teal Dance for 1, and it was this one card that made me realize this run could definitely be something special. A Meowth EX for next turn, which changes everything. Suddenly, I can now get a Lily to draw 8, or I can find Cyrano to get my Pokemon, but only after I see what James is able to do next turn. And after I pass, I realize he isn't able to do very much. He evolves one of his Beldums into a Metang, uses Metal Maker, and then passes immediately after. After drawing for turn, I'm able to use Meowth to find Cyrano, which finds me Latias EX, Mega Kangaskhan EX, and Lily's Clefairy. Thanks to the Energy Switch top deck from last turn, I attach a Lightning to Clefairy, E-switch the Psychic from Ogerpon to Clefairy, and attach a Lily's Pearl to my Clefairy before using Full Moon Rondo to KO his Cramorant for my first prize. After seeing his top deck and Metal Maker draws, James forfeits and chooses second for game 2, knowing that this game is over. Game 2 is a little bit more normal than game 1, where we were both kind of bricking. I get my Mega Kangaskhan up in the active spot, draw some cards, and attach energy to it before passing. Since I couldn't find Genesect plus a tool on the first turn going first, James is able to use Team Rocket's Transceiver to find Team Rocket's Petrol to find him his Precious Trolley A-Spec. After filling his bench with a Genesect, 1 Drillbur, and 3 more Beldums, James uses Metallic Signal from Genesect to find an Excadrill and a Metang before passing. Next turn, I use Run Errand and find an Energy Switch as well as a Teal Mask Ogerpon EX. In my hand was already a Grass Energy, Psychic Energy, and a Boss's Orders. This allows me to go for an insane play where I bench Teal Mask Ogerpon, use Teal Dance, draw a card, Energy Switch the Grass to my active Kangaskhan, attach Psychic for turn, and boss KO his lone Drillbur. This is a great start for sure, but James makes the perfect follow-up play by using Metal Maker a few times, accelerating 3 energy to Genesect and 2 onto one of his bench Metang, and then he uses Protect Charge for 150, while making Genesect take 30 less damage during my turn. This 30 damage actually matters a lot, since with him having only 4 bench Pokemon, I now need to find either a Raging Bolt attack to KO Genesect, or I need Clefairy powered up, Area 0 in play, and a full bench of 8. I am able to get the Clefairy KO with 8 bench Pokemon, but one of the new bench Pokemon unfortunately had to be a second Kangaskhan, which now gives James a line back into this game where he can win in 2 knockouts. Despite being up 3-6, James is able to find boss KO on my damaged Kangaskhan with Metagross, and now we're tied at 3-3. With this Kangaskhan stuck on my board and my Chien Pao prize, did I mess up? Is this game over? Well, I still have the power of hoping on my side. You see, Excadrill isn't incredible at chaining Metagross attacks, especially with a boss's orders at the same time, so all I need to do is KO this Metagross, force him to hit another, and then use Hero's Cape to steal an extra prize. But this is where I actually make a pretty big mistake. After the boss KO, I use Lily's Determination to shuffle my hand into my deck and draw 6 cards, but I had an Energy Switch in my hand and Wellspring on my bench, meaning I could have Energy Switched to the Wellspring, giving me a line where I can find my Water Energy and boss KO his 2 Metangs for game. This now means that off of the Lily plus Flip the Script plus Run Errand, and during my next turn at least, I would need to find my 1 of water energy and an energy switch to win the game, and since I'm down 2 E-switch at this point, it's going to be really hard. I am able to KO his Metagross with my Clefairy that survived last turn after attaching a water for turn to Wellspring, but James is able to find another Metagross KO on my Clefairy, and he doesn't have to discard his energy since Clefairy is weak to metal. Now all I need to do is find 1 of my 2 energy switch and I win the game, as I already have boss's orders in the hand as well as an energy card. But after flip the script, 1 Teal Dance, and run errand, I whiff. However, there was one way out all along, my ace spec. I used Cypher Maniac's code breaking to put Hero's Cape on top of my deck, and I used my last Teal Dance to draw into it. I attached the cape to my active Ogerpon and used Myriad Leaf Shower to take the knockout, going down to 1 prize left. With a cape on Ogerpon, it has 310 HP, meaning it's just out of range of 1 Metagross attack. Also, since I knew James was playing Gravity Mountains, I figured Brave Bangle wasn't something to be worried about, meaning that this Ogerpon cannot get 1-hit KO'd here. I am quite literally forcing James to have exactly Metagross and hit 3 energy off Metal Maker and attach for turn and a boss's orders, and he doesn't get it. After about a minute of thinking it over and using his Metal Makers, James eventually concedes the match, and I advance to 2-0 in the tournament. At this point, I should probably feel good about my play, right? But I am kind of beating myself up over that misplay because it was game losing if I didn't find my Hero's Cape there. Ultimately, I think it was just a lack of focus and quality of my own play, so I knew I needed to be better about that. Round 3 goes up and I'm at table 1, meaning I'm going on stream this round. Azul, however, wasn't awake yet, so the feed was instead just the normal stream without Azul's watch party. I'm going against another Mega Excadrill, and I had a good idea that this was the exact 60 James had played against me last round. My opponent won the coin flip and chose second, which is fine for me as I blindly choose first anyways. Game 1 starts with my Mega Kangaskhan staring down a Beldum. I use Run Errand, attach a Lightning to my Kang, and pass. Brandon starts his turn with Team Rocket's Transceiver for Petrol for Trolley, establishing a Genesect, Drillbur, and 2 more Beldums before attaching a Metal to his active and using Dig Claws for 10. It might seem insignificant, but this 10 damage from Dig Claws actually matters quite a bit, as now 1 use of Undermine for Mega Excadrill plus a Metagross attack will be enough to KO my caped Kangaskhan, which is what I usually go for in the matchup. Will the 2 milled cards from Undermine matter? I start my turn with Meowth EX to check my prize cards and eventually find me Cypher Maniac's code breaking. I already have a Teal Mask and an energy switch in my hand as well as a fighting energy to attach, so I just Cypher for Cape, Grass Energy, bench Teal Mask, Teal Dance after run erranding into both cards. I E-switch to the Kang, attach fighting and Hero's Cape before using Rapid Fire combo to knock out Beldum. Thanks to the Genesect he established last turn, Brandon is able to use Metal Maker and Metallic Signal as well as flip the script to piece together an Undermine attack. He also used Team Rocket's Petrol to grab a Judge and put it into his hand, meaning that Judge is something I'm going to be playing around heavily next turn. Undermine comes out, deals 90 to my Kangaskhan, and is able to mill my 1 of Lily's Pearl and a Crispin, both cards that could matter, especially since I prized a Crispin. My turn starts and I'm able to draw into the combination of Raging Bolt EX and Crispin, and I'm able to easily take a massive 350 damage one-shot on Mega Excadrill, leaving just a single Lightning Energy on my Kangaskhan for an easier knockout. I also established Pheasantipity to play around Judge, and since I go up 2-6 here, I knew that chaining 2 attackers was all I needed to do to win. Brandon was able to piece together a Metagross attack in combination with that Judge, but makes a massive mistake and forgets to evolve his Metang into Metagross before playing the Judge. After the Judge, he's able to flip the script to find Metagross on the 3rd card, but he accidentally looks at a 4th card off of the ability, and since this would be a 2 prize penalty and I have 2 left, the game ends instantly. Brandon said he did this because he's so used to using Metal Maker to look at the top 4 that he just thought Flip the Script was Metal Maker and looked at 4 on accident. Game 2, Brandon chooses second again, but I'm able to pull out my trap card, Genesect. I start Kangaskhan, use Run Errand, and then play Ultra Ball for Genesect, attach my Hero's Cape to it, attach a Grass to my active, and pass after benching Latias. Unable to play Trolley, Brandon can only set up a few Beldums and a Genesect that he had in his hand. He uses Metallic Signal for some Metangs and passes with no Drillburs in play. I immediately Crispin a Lightning onto Kang and add a Fighting to my hand, use Run Errand, attach a Water to Kangaskhan, bench Fez in case of a Judge, and use Rapid Fire combo to KO Beldum. Brandon does set up his Genesect EX with Metang's Metal Maker and gets off a Protect charge for 150 into Kang. And since my Hero's Cape is stuck on Genesect, this is a guaranteed 2-shot. So if I whiff the KO on Genesect right here, I might lose the prize race because of it. However, I have Ultra Ball and Meowth EX just sitting in my hand since it went undisrupted. So after using Run Errand to maybe find one of the pieces first, I bench Meowth, use Last Ditch Catch to grab Crispin, Ultra Ball for Raging Bolt, Crispin a Lightning onto Bolt, put a Grass into my hand in case I find a Teal Mask, attach that Fighting from the first Crispin onto my Raging Bolt, retreat for free with the Skyliner ability, and use Bellowing Thunder to KO Genesect, leaving just one lightning on my Kangaskhan once again. Brandon then whiffs the response Metagross and is forced to use Switch to sacrifice his other Metang before just passing. However, since I don't have a Terra Pokemon down with this board, I can't win the game this turn with Wellspring's Torrential Pump. So I just retreat into Kangaskhan, run errand, and then find a Crispin to attack with Rapid Fire combo, going down to 2 prizes remaining and straining my opponent with just one Metang in play. This time Brandon does hit the Metagross KO on my active Kangaskhan, but with no hand disruption, the game is over. I bench Wellspring Mask Ogerpon, put Area 0 in play, bench me out the X, use Last Ditch Catch to find Cypher Maniac to find Glass Trumpet and Energy Switch, flip the script to draw into all of them, bench a Mega Kangaskhan, Glass Trumpet 1 energy onto it, Energy Switch from Meowth to Kangaskhan, attach for turn, retreat, and Rapid Fire combo to go up 3-0 in the tournament. One more win will guarantee me a berth into Top Cut. However, looking at tables 2 and 3 after the game, I noticed an apple-shaped problem that had to be addressed: Festival Lead. Table 2 had one Festival Lead player at 2-0, and Table 3 was actually a Festival Lead mirror match. Festival Lead isn't just scary for my deck because they can win a traditional prize race with single prize attackers, but the new card from Pitch Black, Gladion's Final Battle, is truly terrifying. If it's the last card in your hand, you can play this supporter to increase your Pokemon's damage this turn by 80. However, since the Festival Lead attackers attack twice per turn, this is effectively a 160 damage buff. And with Thwacky's Boom Boom Groove ability, finding whatever cards you want each turn, they can consistently chain attacks and use Gladion's Final Battle to just nuke my Pokemon. On top of that, these decks usually play Shaman, meaning that Wellspring, my only attacker that can favorably trade into the apples, is almost completely useless as it can't snipe the bench. If that weren't bad enough, at least 2 of the lists played Tool Scrapper, not only neutralizing my Hero's Cape, but also my Genesect, meaning I can't stop them from using their secret boxes consistently. This is, in other words, an atrocious matchup for me, and once round 3 ends, reality sinks in. There are only 2 players at 3-0 right now, and they're me and Gabe Shumway, who I know for a fact is playing Festival League. After thinking and talking about the matchup with friends, I come up with a loose game plan, which is basically just to get lucky. So that's obviously what I hope to do in round 4 against Festival League. Game 1 starts with me choosing first, but after starting Genesect, all I can do is attach a grass to it and pass. Gabe doesn't have much going on, however, using some bug catching sets before passing with a Grookey in the active spot. Next turn, I use Meowth the X to find Cyrano for Latias, Kangaskhan, and Pheasantipity. My loose game plan, since he only had one Grookey in play, was to use Cruel Arrow on the Grookeys and try to hope he bricks from there. I use Run Errand, can't find another energy, and am forced to just pass. Gabe then establishes a Dipplin and a Thwacky, uses Kieran to switch into Dipplin, and Boom Boom Grooves for Secret Box. He leaves himself with just a Lily's Determination, Air Balloon, Festival Grounds, and a Mystery card in his hand, so the odds Kang gets one-shotted are pretty low, especially since he already used Kieran. However, I was so tunnel vision on using Cruel Arrow that I missed this fact. If I'd attacked with Kangaskhan, I'm almost surely safe, but after using Cruel Arrow to KO Thwacky, Gabe just finds Brave Bengal Stadium to one-shot my Fez, and after looking at my garbage hand that I left myself with, I concede the game. I definitely should have used Kangaskhan to KO his Dipplin here, as it wouldn't get one-hit KO'd very easily. Game 2 starts with a Kangaskhan for me this time, and on my first turn, I can use Run Errand, attach, and pass. Gabe, despite not finding a Buddy Buddy Poffin, uses Lily and some bug catching sets to establish a very solid board with Applins, Grookeys, and a Relor. The fact that Gabe played a Pokepad and could have grabbed Shaman but didn't told me immediately that either he didn't play Shaman or that it was prized. But since I never saw Shaman come down in game 1, I'm assuming at this point that he just doesn't play it. And this definitely opens the door for me. Turn 2 for me starts with a Crispin and a Run Errand, but as a last-ditch effort to slow Gabe down, I bench Genesect and attach Lily's Pearl to it, just praying it would be enough. I knock out his active with Kangaskhan, and to my absolute shock, Gabe Ultra Balls away his secret box next turn. The desperation play I had made worked out, and after some boring turns of Gabe just drawing and passing, he is able to land a Gladion onto my caped Kangaskhan. However, since he didn't have enough benched Pokemon from passing and sacrificing so many different ones, Kang just barely survives, and after losing even more ground and his entire hand, he just forfeits. We're going to our first game 3 of the tournament, and honestly, my odds don't look great here as Gabe chooses first and opens with Secret Box. He gets the usual apples and gorillas in play, as well as Relor before passing. I start with Mega Kangaskhan, a Crispin, and a Teal Mask Ogerpon, meaning that for a turn 1 attack, Energy Switch was the only missing piece. Since the matchup is so bad for me, I decided to take a massive risk by using Crispin first to thin energies out of my deck before using Run Errand and just hoping I high roll into the Energy Switch. However, after seeing one Energy Switch is prized, I realized my odds aren't that great. I used Teal Dance for 1 with the Energy Switch, but Mama Kang blesses up with the E-Switch from the first card. I attach for turn to Kangaskhan, Energy Switch from Ogerpon to Kang, and get a turn 1 Rapid Fire combo KO on his active Grookey. To my shock, however, Gabe doesn't have the most explosive follow-up up despite using Secret Box. However, he is able to establish a pretty decent board thanks to the Lily he acquired from his turn 1 box. Despite this, Gabe doesn't get an attack off into my Kangaskhan and just passes with an Applin in the active. But next turn and in this entire game, the draws from Run Errand could literally not have been any better for me. I'm able to boss and KO Gabe's newly evolved Rabska on the bench with Kangaskhan while benching Wellspring and getting a Lightning onto it, immediately threatening Torrential Pump. Gabe is finally able to start attacking, however, and he boss KOs my Wellspring with a Brave Bangle for the one shot, tying things up at 4-4. After Flip the Script and Run Errand, I'm somehow able to piece together a Crispin plus Night Stretcher plus Energy Switch, which I pulled from the prizes, to bring back Wellspring and take a massive 2-prize KO on 2 Diplins. Gabe responds again, however, with a Gladion's Final Battle plus Do the Wave KO on my Wellspring to tie it up at 2-2 again. All I need to draw Flip the Script is either an Energy Switch or my Water Energy, and thanks to the Night Stretcher and Cypher Maniac in my hand already, I can close it out with one final Torrential Pump. However, I whiff, and am forced to KO Gabe's active Diplin, meaning that if Gabe can just take a knockout this turn, he wins. But before I rush any decisions, I realize I can just use Cypher Maniac anyways to find a Hero's Cape to put on my Meowth. After caping Meowth and swinging for a knockout, I sit there and pray that Gabe whiffs. To be fair, the odds he whiffs are pretty high as he had to discard his entire hand with Gladion's Final Battle, and after thinking for about 30 seconds and checking discard piles, Gabe concedes. By some miracle, call it plot armor, call it whatever you want, I am now 4-0 in the tournament, guaranteed to advance to the top cut. However, I wasn't just going to settle with that. In this tournament, we were playing with the official rules surrounding seeding, being that the higher seed in top cut determines who goes first and second for game 1. As the only player with 4 wins at this point in the tournament, I knew what I should do. I'm going to go for the first seed and not ID this round. But funnily enough, I couldn't have ID'd anyway as round 5 pairs and I'm against Festival Lead once again. However, it is the same 60 as Gabe, so I've already faced this one before and have a decent idea of what to do. The fact that they don't play Shaman gives me a lot of hope, but at the same time, I know this matchup is pretty bad. At this point, I know that they don't play Shaman, that they do play Scrapper, Secret Box, and 2 Gladion. However, after shuffling and setting up, I must have forgot the whole Tool Scrapper thing, as in game 1, I build my game plan around a caped Clefairy, buying me 1 extra turn. But Tyler uses Lily and finds a Tool Scrapper to completely nuke my Clefairy, and then he Boom Boom Grooves for a Secret Box that basically spells doom for me. And after recognizing this, I concede game 1 yet again. For the second time in a row, if I want to beat Festival Lead, it's gonna have to be with my back against the wall in games 2 and 3. Game 2 starts much better for me though, with me taking some early prize cards against Tyler's underdeveloped board. From my memory, the game wasn't that interesting and he kinda just bricked, leading to a concession once I was halfway done winning. Game 3 against Festival Lead once again, but this time it wouldn't be me who hit a game-changing early attack. Tyler chose first, got some Pokemon down and passed, but my start was far from perfect. I used Run Errands with my active Kangaskhan, find absolutely nothing of value, and can only attach a Lightning to my active, attach Hero's Cape, and pass. But little did I know, Tyler has game in hand. His hand consists of Tool Scrapper, Thwacky, Diplin, a Festival Grounds, a Grass Energy, and 2 irrelevant cards. All Tyler has to do is attach for turn to the Diplin, evolve into Thwacky, Scrapper away my Cape, Boom Boom Groove for Secret Box, discarding the Stadium and 2 random cards for another Stadium, a Poffin to fill his bench, a Bangle, and Gladion's Final Battle, and this would be more than enough to donk my Mega Kangaskhan. Helplessly watching and hoping he didn't see it, I had some terrible feeling that this was it, that I was gonna lose. However, Tyler made a mistake that ended up costing him the game. He played the Festival Grounds from his hand instead of using Secret Box to discard it, and this meant now that the Gladion donk was completely impossible as I'd be forced to discard his Tool Scrapper with the box. Realizing that he screwed up, Tyler instead makes the next best play and grabs out a Lily to shuffle draw 8 and keeps setting up. Diplin does swing for 200 on my Kang with Do the Wave, but I'm finally able to establish a board. I'm able to get Meowth for Cyrano, and I'm able to start being aggressive. I take KO after KO after KO, and Tyler's turn 2 Lily didn't seem to yield him very much, as he's forced to keep sacrificing bench Pokemon. First falls Relor, then an Applin, and after enough slugging away, I emerge victorious, somehow winning game 3 against Festival Lead again and advancing to 5-0 in the New England Invitational. My round 6 opponent, sitting at 4-1, decides to ID with me after we play a best of 1 to see if he could win. And this ID guarantees me the first seed with a final Swiss record of 5 wins, 0 losses, and 1 intentional tie. To say I was feeling good would be an understatement. I could finally relax and not worry about playing Pokemon in a few minutes, at least for a little while. I get back to the event, but my friends have a message for me, which is the results of the matches that happened while I was gone. Normally, this is just a good thing to hear, but after hearing the first 3 words said, my heart sinks. You're playing Zam. Alakazam is quite possibly my deck's worst matchup. If they get set up, they can one-shot my entire field with 1 prizers, meaning I can't out-trade them. And the only defense for me being hand disruption is something that my list completely lacks. In other words, this is as close to an auto loss as can be possible. But to make things even worse, unlike the Festival League players, my Zam opponent plays Shaman. Therefore, Wellspring is almost completely off the table, meaning I can't even apply much pressure. I wish this top 8 segment could be longer, but despite Azul forcing my match to be on the stream, it barely lasted 20 minutes. I bricked completely in game 1, getting donked by a turn 2 Candy Alakazam enriching energy play, and in game 2, despite Noah prizing 2 of his Abras, the benching of Shaman sealed my fate. 3 powerful hand attacks later, and I was officially eliminated from the tournament, finishing 5th. Knowing that my deck and quality of play had a real chance to win the entire event, and the massive cash prize was a little annoying at first, but in the end, I'm ultimately very grateful. Grateful for my friends who organized, ran, and funded this awesome tournament. Grateful for all of the wonderful people at the event who supported me and whom I supported back, and obviously grateful for the Pokemon TCG for creating and supporting a game as wonderful as this. One where improvement is never ending, and one where despite some variance, skill will always reign supreme. Thanks for watching. This is a very different style of video from what I usually put out, so let me know if you enjoyed it down below. Anyways, take care. Have a good one. Bye.